Well, welcome to this special episode of Sooner Legends Podcast. I'm your host, Mike the Legend Wilkerson, and as you can tell, I have special guest Barry Trammell with me, where we're going to be discussing the probation years at OU and all that. So, welcome in, and let's get it going.
Through 153 games, our record was 125, 24, 4, 2 now. People don't know what it is to be champions. Oklahoma invented it.
Well, welcome in, Barry. You're my first big guest that I've ever had on my podcast, and how you doing today, sir?
Doing well. Looking
Uh,
forward to the spring game and ready for football to get here in the fall.
Me too, sir. Well, you told me just before we started you didn't have a whole heck of a lot of time, so let's just jump right into it. Let's talk about the probation years at OU. Chuck Fairbanks took the head coaching job at New England. Barry Switzer takes over at head coach, and boom, we get hit with probation. And what led to all that, Barry, for us getting on
Well,
probation?
the infractions were primarily the grade altering situation down at Galveston Ball High School. Kerry Jackson and Mike Phillips, quarterback and defensive end, were the guys involved. Some OU coaches and some Galveston Balls administrators sort of tried to get these guys into school when their transcripts weren't allowing it. And frankly, I don't know that I ever knew how it came to light, but it eventually came to light, and the investigation resulted in a what at the time was a pretty severe penalty: 2 years, no television, 2 years, no bowls. Both of those for 74. The no TV included the 75 season. The no bowl included the 73 season. So it actually went over a 3-year span.
You know, because I remember that like it was yesterday. I always had a what if in my mind. What if we wouldn't have been on probation, and what if Kerry Jackson would have got to be the starting quarterback? Just what kind of quarterback he would have been for us in those years, Barry?
Well, yeah, I mean, he certainly was sensational as a freshman. Dave Robertson was the starting quarterback in 72, but Kerry Jackson was so impressive that the Sooners, with Switzer as offensive coordinator, developed some packages. He played quite a bit and showed signs of great promise, and was clearly the heir apparent to be the quarterback. It's hard to argue with what Steve Davis did, though. I mean, Davis, a great quarterback. They went 32-1-1. Could Kerry Jackson have done better? Well, yeah, but the odds are he would have done worse, because the level of room to fall and the level of room to rise is a big difference.
Yeah, and a lot of people probably don't remember this, or some of my viewers weren't even born then. When we got the probation, that Kerry Jackson also had that vehicle accident where he got, I think, his upper body where he got injured. So, Barry, one thing that stands out in my mind about that 73, 74, 75 season, and particularly 73 and 74, because you had the Selman brothers, Jimbo Elrod. Oh, good gosh. Wasn't Randy Hughes on that team too?
Randy Hughes was the safety. Rod Schote was a
linebacker.
Yeah, it was a star-studded defense, no doubt about it.
Would you, out of that 74 season alone, would you agree with me that that was probably one of the better teams of the national championship OU Sooners that you witnessed?
Yeah. Now, the one thing is they didn't play in a bowl game, so they weren't challenged. The regular season schedules back in the 70s were generally tougher than what we see today.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
the postseason track is much tougher today. When you look at Barry Switzer and Bud Wilkinson, they combined for 6 national championships. And in truth, only one of those national title games was won in a true championship game, 85.
Right.
Sooners had to win the 75 season Orange Bowl against Michigan, but Michigan, I think, was ranked 6th. So it wasn't a showdown national title game. All of Wilkinson's national titles were awarded before the bowl games. So what Bob Stoops and more recent coaches have had to deal with, much tougher Big 12 championship game, multiple game playoffs, a true championship game. So the regular seasons in the old days were tougher. The postseason today, tougher.
Right. Now there's one player in that probation area that hardly gets talked about, and he grew up just right up the road from me at Stroud, and that's Grant Burgett.
Yeah, Grant had a star-crossed career, starting halfback on Barry Switzer's first team, and had put in his time. I think he was a junior that year, maybe a fourth-year junior. But Grant was an Oklahoman Player of the Year as a high school senior at Stroud. Really a revered recruit. And then in the first game of Barry Switzer's head coaching career, Grant's knee gets torn up in the game down at Baylor. The memory I have of that is, those were the days when very few games. I was 12 years old, listening on the radio. So you listen all night, you listen to the post-game show and everything. And Barry Switzer was distraught in the locker room. He wasn't talking about the victory. He wasn't talking about his debut. He was just talking about how awful he felt for Grant Burgett. And it basically ended Grant's career. He came back and played some, but he wasn't the same. And it was, it was in many ways a star-crossed night.
Yeah. I've heard Little Joe talk several, and especially when Grant passed away, that Little Joe said he was one tough hombre.
Yeah, he was going to be a really good player, and that forced the Sooners to sort of jerry-rig the backfield and do all kinds of things in that 73 season. But it turns out OU, like always, seems like, had a lot of running back.
Yeah. Another thing that stands out in my mind, Barry, that 73 season is we tied USC at the Coliseum. And just after that tie, like you said, in the 73, we beat Waco, and then we just went down that schedule, and it seemed like the toughest game we had on that schedule, and I remember it very clearly, was Miami, and the rest of them were blowouts.
Right. Yeah, that Miami game, that was the 73 season. So that was a game at Owen Field. What I remember about that game is when OU went to the Wishbone in 70, my brother and I, we kept talking about the Wishbone, and we were infatuated with the Wishbone. And early on, probably by the 71 season, we talked about the pitch outs from Jack Mildren or Dave Robertson or Kerry Jackson or Steve Davis. And at one point we talked about, why doesn't anybody ever intercept one of those and take it to the house? Against Miami that day at Owen Field, the Hurricanes did just that. They took one about 60 yards to the house off a wishbone pitch. So this was the days before Howard Schnellenberger, Jimmy Johnson, all those guys. So this was a talented, but it wasn't a powerhouse Miami. But they really played the socks off the Sooners, both in Owen Field in 73 and in Miami on a Friday night in 75. So it was not a brutal Miami team, but it was a good, talented Miami team.
Yes, it was, Barry. If I remember right, wasn't Miami close to shutting down their football program?
Well, they talked about it. In the 80s and early 90s, or I forgot the time, 90s, they talked about shutting down the program because of all the scandal. But in the 70s, there was some discussion. I don't claim to know how close they got, but there was some talk that, hey, do we really want to play college football? And it turns out it's a good thing for Miami marketing, for Miami branding, that they did, because in the mid-80s, they became a national powerhouse, and still, they've been pretty mediocre for the last 15 years, but they still, maybe 20 years, but they still have that national brand because of what those guys did in the 80s and 90s.
I caught that piece y'all did several years ago about Sooner Magic, where they detailed all the Sooner magic that happened. And you said something that I completely agree with it. And y'all was talking about Little Joe during the 75 season where we got beat by Kansas 23-3, and then we go up to Missouri and have to have magic by Little Joe. And you said that the 75 season wasn't as good as that 74 season.
Well, yeah, the team was not as good. I mean, the
Yeah.
70. Actually, I would hear if you want to rank Switzer's three teams, his first three teams, I'd rank 73 the best team, and then 74, and then 75. For the reason you mentioned, the close games were in short supply in 73. 74, they had a couple. 75, a bunch, and that 75 down the stretch. Earlier they beat Colorado 21-20. The Bucks scored late in the game, 2 minutes left, minute and a half, whatever it was, and Bill Mallory goes for the tie. 21-20, he goes for the tie, and the poor kicker missed the extra point. So the Sooners survived 21-20. And then down the stretch of 75, after the loss to Kansas, they play the Missouri game. It's a 27-20 Missouri win lead, and that 4th and 1 from the Oklahoma 29, and the option pitch right to Joe Washington. He makes a cut. He goes 71 yards for the touchdown. Switzer orders the 2-point conversion. Little Joe barely gets in, or if you're a Missouri Tiger, didn't get in at all. Before replay, who knows? But the thing I remember about that game, and I was listening on the radio again, is people forget there was about 2 minutes left in the game. And when that occurred, Missouri goes right down the field, down 1, and misses a field goal with about a minute left, 40 seconds. Somehow gets the ball back and misses a long one at the buzzer. So the Missouri actually missed 2 field goals in the last 2 minutes. A lot happened after Little Joe's run.
Yeah, that's not talked about, because, like you said, me and Dad, we listen to constant OU football. And if you remember back in them days, Barry, if we wasn't playing a powerhouse like USC in the early season, or Texas or Nebraska, we was on the radio.
Yeah.
No, it's not like.
Here's the best story. Here's the best story from the 75 Missouri game in terms of radio. Mike Trapp's a lifelong friend of mine. Love Mike.
Yes.
He's the play-by-play guy in 75. And literally, here's how's his description. I forget whether it was the first or the second field goal. I assume it was the first one. But anyway, he's setting up the field goal, and here's what he says. He said, "It's good." And then he says, "He missed it. He missed it. I meant the snap was good. I meant the snap was good." And I believe him. I think he just meant the snap was good. He just didn't say the snap. So every heart in Oklahoma just fell to pieces for a fraction of a second.
Yeah, you brought that up, and I remember now, Barry, you're touching memories of me and my dad, because that was my football buddy. And when Trepp said it was good, Dad was like, "Oh, we just lost again." But I guess my best memory, and I'm going to go back to 74, was when we played Oklahoma State, and that punt return or kickoff that Little Joe scored a touchdown on. I mean, you see several white shirts around Little Joe, and then he's down in the end zone.
I think it was his best run ever. We always look at that USC punt return where he treats about 30 yards behind the catch. But I think the smoke through a keyhole punt return against OSU was his best play at Oklahoma. And he's the best big play man in OU history. There's not any question, whether it's a halfback pass to Tinker Owens. My favorite play in OU football history, the quick kick against Texas. I mean, Joe just came up with big play after big play. But his best run was
he did
OSU punt return, smoke through a keyhole. Switzer called it.
Yeah. Well, Barry, we don't have a lot of time left, because I don't want you to be late for your radio show. Out of all the great Sooner teams, etc., that you've watched and listened to on the radio, who's probably your all-time favorite Sooner to ever don the crimson and cream?
Oh, my problem is I transitioned as a kid, to watching OU football, to covering OU football. I started when I was 18.
Right.
And one of the blessings of my life is I've gotten to get to know so many of the great guys. And I really can't really change. I feel so strongly about some of them. So my favorite Sooner is Dewey Selman. You know, when I see him, he calls me an honorary member of the family, which, you know, he's really joking. Everybody knows he is. I've written so much about generation after generation of the Selman family. My favorite thing I've ever written was about Jessie Selman, the Selman brothers' mother. It remains my favorite thing I've ever written. 1995 Mother's Day. But I've written about Dewey's daughters growing up playing basketball together at Norman High, and then now I'm writing about Zach, the Mississippi State athletic director. But I would, Dewey Selman is just such a prince of a guy, and also a great player. You know, I'd have a hard time not putting Dewey Selman at the top of my list. But if you're talking about just guys I enjoyed watching play, I loved Billy Brooks, the wide receiver who, 5, 6, 7 catches a year, and then becomes a high NFL draft pick, plays in the NFL, and would have gone if he'd gone to Stanford or Florida or someplace in the mid 70s, would have had 80 catches a year. Guys like that. I love Darrell Ray. Still get to see Darrell at his barbecue joint from time to time. Always loved Darrell Ray. I used to think, man, if I could look like Darrell Ray, I would be the coolest guy in town. So love Darrell Ray, and he's a wonderful player. Darrell Ray is my choice as the best Sooner ever to not make All-American.
Mine
ton
too.
of All-Americans, but I think he's the best that didn't make it. Probably should have made it. But those are just some of the guys that I love. Thomas Lott, love the way Thomas ran the wishbone. Been fortunate that I get to interview and do some radio and all kinds of things with Thomas over the years. So those are just some of the guys I come to mind.
Well, listen, Barry, you got about 10 minutes before your radio station starts. I'm going to tell my followers out there to go check out Barry and Jenny on Sellout Crowd. Y'all's on there, what, twice a week? Y'all have a YouTube pod?
Yeah, I mean, we do 2 or 3 shows a week, but we also write virtually every day. So we've got all kinds of things. I had a column this week about Zach Alley, the new defensive coordinator, and a lot of college football trend stuff with the realignment, the SEC, and the television, all that stuff. So we cover a bunch of stuff on there, no doubt about it.
Well, Barry, I hope and pray that you will join me again, because I've really enjoyed this short segment, reliving some of my days as a young Sooner, and we can talk more when you got more time, because one thing I love talking about is the antitrust law where Andy Coates
Georgia,
and Clyde Mitchell.
1984 Georgia. Well, let me tell you what. I mean, I can talk about all kinds of sports all day long, but you want to get into the 1970s OU football, and that's my wheelhouse, because
that's my wheelhouse too. That's mine too, Barry.
The very best games, I think the most compelling games in OU football history, in my mind, I never saw the 1974 and 1975 Texas games, which were just unbelievable drama. From every, you're living and dying on the radio with those, and just Horace Ivory and Tony DiRienzo and the Giants. And so then you go to 77 when literally a leg beat up OU in 1977. The leg of Russell Erxleben, greatest game ever played by a kicker/punter. He makes 2 field goals. They were 64 and 58 yards. He has winning game of his life. He pins the Sooners inside the 20 time after time, average 50-something yards a punt. Nobody's ever dominated a football game with their leg like Russell Erxleben in the Cotton Bowl in 1977.
That's right. Well, listen, Trim, I hope you come back and see us here at Sooner Legends in the future. You're more than welcome to come on.
You bet. Glad to do it, Mike. Thanks.
And glad to make your acquaintance.
You bet.
So Barry, you have a great day, and let's do it again sometime, buddy.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And we're going to get out of here. Take care, guys. You can just go ahead and leave the studio down there, Barry. Should be a X.
All right.
And take care, my friend.
You bet.